Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here. In today's video, we're going to be going over the 5 things that I don't exactly like about the all-new Honda Passport. Before we get into the video though, as always, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. Let's get into it. Number 1 is the acceleration. So if you guys don't know, this has a naturally aspirated 3.5 liter V6 that goes through a 9-speed automatic transmission. It is good for 280 horsepower and 262 pound-feet of torque, which is right where it needs to be competitive within the segment. Most SUVs in the segment have anywhere from like 270 to about 300 horsepower. So why would I be complaining about the acceleration? Well, it's just this segment in general. All the SUVs in this segment are pretty dang heavy. They're anywhere from like 4,500 to 5,000 pounds. Typically, this is right there in the middle, roughly. It's like 4,600 pounds, roughly. So again, it's right where it needs to be, but it's just this segment because this segment of SUV is pretty dang heavy, but they still use small SUV powertrains within this segment. And so it's less the Passport, it's more of the segment. And you guys know I have a Toyota 4Runner now, and same issue. It's a pretty heavy SUV with a smaller SUV powertrain because it just has a V6. And so I'm hoping that, you know, with electrification, these SUVs will feel better in the future because they'll have more power, more torque instantaneously. But right now, as it stands, yeah, just not the best acceleration. Number 2 is the front armrests. So this one is a pretty nitpicky point by me, but I have to make it. And, well, it's the fact that this has these weird armrests. So you guys can see, does this. The driver one has like a little lockout, which is kind of interesting. The reason I think that the driver one has the lockout is because, you know, some people might want it a little bit lower because of how you have the seat and everything. It's just awkward angling. The reason they have this is because the center console. Now, I appreciate the storage space the center console gives, but I cannot get a comfortable elbow position on this armrest. And so I'm glad that it has an armrest. I'm glad that it has a big center console, but you do have to concede having a kind of awkward situation with your elbow. Well, at least me. Now, number 3 is ground clearance. So this is the Passport TrailSport, which is the off-road package. It has about 8.1 inches of ground clearance, which historically is actually pretty decent. Super iconic off-roaders, Jeep Wrangler, Toyota Land Cruiser back in the day, right? That's how much ground clearance they had. But in terms of modern standards, it's not a whole lot in terms of being an off-roader. So you guys know I have a Toyota 4Runner TRD Pro. This has 9.6 inches of ground clearance. You guys can't see it because it's in the garage. I have a new Wrangler with the Extreme Recon package that has 12.9 inches of ground clearance. So yeah, this over here having 8.1 inches of ground clearance makes it great from a crossover perspective. But in terms of, you know, actual off-roaders, it doesn't really hold a candle to them from a ground clearance perspective. And on top of that, when I took this off-road, I kept scraping this little chin guard down here. That's obviously for aerodynamic purposes. I'm sure to help out with fuel economy on the highway. But again, if you're going to make an off-road package, I feel like just accept that you're not going to have the best fuel economy with the package and just go all in with the off-roading side of things rather than just like basically putting all-terrain tires on this and calling it a day. But yeah, as an off-roader, ground clearance is a little bit of an issue. Number 4 is the cruise control. Now, if you guys watched my review on this, then you guys probably already know that, well, I'm not a huge fan of the cruise control system in this. Now, here's what I have to say. First off, the cruise control system is very safe. It has a really solid following distance. You guys can see the whole setup here on the steering wheel, and it does have steering assistance. I don't have a complaint about this having a pretty far following distance because, again, that's safe, and I'm all about safety. My problem is this system is very finicky. It like just constantly taps on the brakes. It doesn't seem like it's very good at regulating speed in conjunction to someone being in front of you with the adaptive system. So I think it definitely needs tuning. The steering assistance is definitely assistance, right? A lot of other cars, like the new Jeep Grand Cherokee, for example, you basically can just have your hand on the steering wheel like this and it'll do everything for you. This is not that. You have to have your hands on the steering wheel. It keeps you centered in the lane most of the time, but I had so many times where this went over the line, and like I really had to pay attention to everything it was doing, and I honestly just turned it off because I was like, this is pointless. Like, it's not really helping me out with driving. It's just making me constantly go over the lane and freaking out and telling me that I'm not in the right place when I am. And so, yeah, needs a little bit of work. Now, the 5th and final thing is the fact that the Passport is kind of a marketing failure. Now, I'm going to have to go on a slight monologue for this thing, but let me explain. So the Passport is supposed to be the off-road version of the Honda Pilot. And then the TrailSport is supposed to be the off-road version of the Passport, but you can also get a TrailSport Pilot. And so this is the off-road version of a car, but then this is the off-road version of an off-road version. So it's kind of confusing from a marketing standpoint as it stands. But I think the bigger blunder is the fact that Honda thought that they could compete with Jeep and with Toyota. Because you guys got to remember, this is pretty similar in size to the Grand Cherokee and to the 4Runner as well. And again, since Honda is marketing this as their cool off-roader, you can tell that they're trying to pull some share from that market. But here's the deal, is they didn't go about this in the same way that Jeep went about it or how Toyota went about it. They went about it in the same way that Chevy went about it, and Chevy's situation completely failed, and here's what I mean. So if we look at the Toyota 4Runner, it is a truck-based SUV, right? It's body on frame. It has a solid rear axle, independent front suspension, so it actually drives really well on road. It has this big tank-like feel that people absolutely love. It's a great daily driver. Doesn't get the best fuel economy, right? But it's super robust, super reliable, and so people absolutely love them, and they buy them up like crazy. And so resale value on the 4Runners is amazing, and they're just tons of demand behind that. And frankly, like, look how cool the 4Runner is, right? It's this crazy cool looking off-roader. Now, the other thing that I don't have any way of showing you because I don't own a Grand Cherokee is Jeep's way of going about things. So Jeep has two vehicles. They've got more than that, but they have two vehicles that we need to talk about. The Grand Cherokee and the Wrangler. The Wrangler is a body-on-frame SUV, solid rear and solid front axle, right? Dedicated off-roader. It sucks on-road. Like, it is not a good on-road vehicle at all. And Jeep knows this. But the Wrangler's iconic and looks awesome. And so Jeep goes, okay, we'll build a vehicle similar to the Honda Pilot, unibody, independent front and rear suspension, that isn't as great off-roading, but still is pretty good off-roading, and people will buy it because they'll go, oh, I want to have a Jeep because, like, Wranglers are really cool. Wrangler doesn't work with my lifestyle because I need something more comfortable. So then they go and buy Grand Cherokees. And again, the sales numbers support this with the 4Runner and with the Grand Cherokee and with the Wrangler. All three of these vehicles sell in massive numbers, hundreds of thousands every single year. And then there's the third example, which is the Chevy Blazer, where Chevy took an iconic off-roader name and they applied it to what is essentially a Honda Pilot, Honda Passport, right? Sorry, not Pilot, but Passport, unibody, independent front and rear suspension vehicle. And Chevy doesn't have any cool off-roader in their segment to back it up. There's no halo car that people can basically go and purchase or look up to and be like, oh, well, I can't afford the halo car. The halo car doesn't make sense for me to buy because it's not as practical, so I'll go buy the Blazer instead, right? Ford's also proven that with the new Bronco, because you have the Bronco and the Bronco Sport. Tons of people have gone in and bought the Bronco Sport because it kind of looks like the big Bronco, and the big Bronco they can't afford or just doesn't work with them from a practicality standpoint. So I know it's kind of a weird way of saying things, but hopefully that makes sense to you guys, where Honda did the Chevy thing and they basically just released a unibody SUV with independent front and rear suspension, called it an off-roader, and they thought they'd sell it in big numbers because it's their quote-unquote rugged SUV, but the only way for them to do that is to actually build a rugged SUV like the 4Runner, or what they could also do is release another SUV that's a truck-based SUV, body on frame, solid rear axle, independent front suspension, right? Or, you know, solid front and rear axles that's a dedicated off-roader. And then people would go in and buy the Passport in droves because they'd be like, oh, Honda's the cool brand with the cool off-roader. I don't want the off-roader because it's not practical for me, so I'll go buy the Passport because it's still kind of like rugged, but then it's actually drives good on-road. Oh boy, that was pretty long-winded, but hopefully that explains the whole situation with the Passport. Anyways, that's going to sum things up for today's video. I will see all of you in that next video.